All right. Good morning, people. This is Larry, and we're going to do Contact Report 101. We've broke the 100 mark. All right. This was translated by the DeepL translator. Corrections and improvements made by Catherine Mossman and Joseph Darmanin, and Quetzal is the contact person. This was on Monday, 16 January 1978 at 0008 hours. In other words, 8 minutes after midnight. Billy, you've been waiting a long time, my son. The last time you said that you would be back around the middle of the week. Quetzal, my area of work is very diverse, and my efforts to address your concerns have lasted longer than I intended. Also, after the unfortunate events, I made an intensive effort to find everything that would take more time. This also led me to various new points which I had missed so far, and which I would now like to mention to you. Various analyses have shown that from various positions you and your whole group and your task are being worked on much more strictly than we had known before. Various sectarian interests and parts of government are trying to use all the means at their disposal to fight you and undermine your center. The means used for this are very diverse and often of a rather complicated nature. I think ... Billy, I have come to feel that because only on the 13th of January I received such a nice letter from the cantonal building authorities who want to crush us. Quetzal, what did you hear? Billy, they ordered a building adjustment thingy, a ban on further construction work, but also a ban on the use of the premises we had repaired, for example, the hall and the office, the telephone booth and the chicken house, as well as the cesspool, etc. Quetzal, this is illogical and incomprehensible in any form, but it testifies to the intrigues directed against you and your task, and to all other malicious machinations. It means a very difficult struggle for you in the future because not only the higher authorities, as you have called them, are hostile to you, but also various negative elements of your local government, as I have been able to analyze. It is this very B ... Billy, you mean local council members? Yes. Quetzal, you call this government place that? Yes. It is very unfortunate that there is so much unreasonableness in your government offices. Some analyses have shown that very many people in your government offices hold their positions in malicious greed for power and apply autocratically written human legislations that mock any human worthiness. For the reason of these power seekers, it gives malicious pleasure to dictatorially rule over those whom you call ordinary citizens, if I have understood you correctly in your idioms at earlier times. Billy, you have, but tell me, Quetzal, do you also not think the terrorist pack and the anarchist pack do not somehow rebel in the knowledge of these evils? I do not think this is right in any wise, but it seems to be the only way for them to defend themselves against the evil, arbitrary power of the states. Quetzal, this is correct, but the terrorists and anarchists have no truthful guidelines of a suitable and humane objective. Like the government officials and the rulers themselves, they resort to senseless and naked, deadly violence, so they are in no wise better than the guilty rulers themselves, who use arbitrary violence, as you have very rightly recognized. Billy, I may not be a politician, but it seems to me that I somehow correctly define the political issues when I assume that this state terror will one day lead to serious and perhaps even fatal unrest. Quetzal, you are very accurate with the truth. At least that is true of certain countries. Billy, but I do not want our group to be drawn into these filthy things. Should I just sit on my butt and let everything happen to us, or should I dig up the hatchet? In my opinion, all I can do is fight. I have learned to speak and write and to acquire a certain knowledge that should be sufficient for such a fight. These are my weapons against all evil arbitrariness of the authorities, because I cannot use other weapons for it. Above all, no firearms, because these are intended only for the self-defense, for the protection of lives. Furthermore, I cannot simply start a war with such weapons, because this would be against reason and all the laws of nature. Quetzal, your words are of good correctness. Your weapons are your superior knowledge, your mastery of writing, and your voice, through which you can achieve the necessary zeal, and in parentheses, culmination points, end parentheses, when you fight the very difficult battle. But in spite of everything, you cannot do it alone. Therefore, you need help from others, from your group members, and from outsiders. It will be a very difficult and hard fight, and defeat or victory will be balanced. What I now become aware of in your previous explanations is that you have not mentioned in any form your consciousness-based powers and abilities that you could use as a weapon. Billy, are you suddenly infested with madness? Quetzal, that is not so, no. Billy, what is this nonsense? Are you trying to put me to the test? Quetzal, no, dear friend, it was just a very joyful statement from me that proves to me that you had not thought of this possibility in any form, because such an action would be maliciously illogical. Billy, you know, Quetzal, that I would never even play with such a thought, even if it were a matter of life. What I cannot direct in such situations through my voice, my word, my writing skills, or through logical manual actions, I will never do through the use of consciousness powers. It would be the most vicious form of Gewalt, in parentheses, a form of violence, end parentheses, I am ever able to use. Quetzal, it speaks from you of very great wisdom and reverence for all truth and love. Billy, nonsense, do not dramatize everything. Quetzal, there is no theatricality in my words, and I am very pleased to be able to speak these to you. You are much greater in yourself than you want to admit. Billy, do not be silly. If that were the case, I would not have done that nonsense on New Year's Eve. Quetzal, have you done any illogical things? Billy, not at all, my son. It was absolute nonsense. I bent spoons, put a coin between my fingers, and punched the papillary lines into it, bent other coins, and even burned through one, whereby I burned the palm of my hand, but I did not realize it until 2 days later, when I had slept a little and my nerves were working properly again. Quetzal, were observers there? Billy, of course, otherwise I would not have done it. I was simply damned angry and at the same time deeply sad because you did not want to understand that these things are possible. Quetzal, you found yourself challenged by this? Billy, no, it just damn pained me that one did not want to understand. That is why I did it. Quetzal, your action was illogical but understandable, so you do not have to blame yourself. Billy, do you think so? Quetzal, your words speak for it. But in the future, you should be more careful and not do your exercises in the presence of observers. Billy, that is what I usually do, but sometimes I just hang it out. Quetzal, this is, of course, in your world where you are lonely despite all the love you receive. You are too much ahead of the present time. But do not think too much about it. It cannot be changed. But now listen to what I have to tell you. In relation to the unfortunate events around Amata, it has emerged that we have no possibilities to eliminate any data in her. The whole complex in her is so confused and intertwined that all her knowledge and the rest of her rational thinking would have to be completely eliminated in order to be successful. This would mean that after such a complete elimination, she would be destroyed in every respect in terms of knowledge and would be back at the beginning again. However, we must not do this, even if it represents a certain danger for you, because she is still capable of causing damage through her negative and malignant transmission of thought power. And there's a letter here. It says Uncanny Forces by Adolf Tillman Perinaut. To outsiders, the following story may seem unbelievable and fantastic, but many witnesses can vouch for the fact that word for word corresponds to the truth and that not even one point has been fibbed. Readers of The Voice of Aquarius Time will certainly remember that an article appeared in issue number 18 without the name of the author being given. So it shall be this time also, for I attach no importance to publicity in relation to my person. And again, I would like to speak a frank word here for Billy, whose importance in the world of today has quite obviously not yet been recognized by the human beings of this world. Far too little is said about him in this monthly, although it is in every respect his initiative, and it has been made from scratch by him in the main work for more than 2 years. Writing, proofreading, assembling, printing, folding, inserting, stitching, and mailing, etc., and all with only one arm. Just think of it. But that is to change now, because an art fair editorial department is to take over this work in the future. Billy would really be relieved by this and could do much more important work. Billy, a human being like you and me, yet so very different from us. His inconspicuousness, based in modesty, puts him in a completely false and also inadequate light with his fellow human beings. For who is aware that there are forces awake in him which, for the uninitiated, border on the uncanny in every form. Forces that in some respects surpass even what parapsychology cannot even imagine in its wildest dreams. Many can still remember, for example, that in the middle of 1977, Billy moved a half-ton styrofoam oven off the road by sheer force of thought, because it was simply lying there in the way. But this is, in fact, only one of his bravura feats, for countless others follow in his wake. For years, this person and that person have been saying that they have observed Billy bending spoons or simply letting them fall in two through pure mental consciousness power. He is said to have crushed coins pressed between his fingers, leaving papillary lines in the metal, and so on. Although I and all the group members of the free interest community are used to quite a lot from Billy, such statements from witnesses have always remained only statements to us, because we have never been able to observe such things with regard to the coins with our own eyes. However, this was to change on New Year's Eve, 1977-78, when Billy, who was otherwise very reserved in such matters, gave a demonstration that probably none of the witnesses will ever forget again. It was like this. We celebrated the turn of the year in the kitchen of the Semyazi Silver Star Center with a good glass of wine and with tapes sung very well by Billy. Somehow it occurred to someone that Billy could demonstrate the bending of a spoon by pure mental (consciousness) power. Elsie Moser handed him a teaspoon which he had brought with him, and which he also actually took between his thumb and forefinger. Then, although I was used to a lot of things from Billy, I thought I was dreaming, because I saw with my own eyes how the spoon slowly bent between the two fingers until Billy finally dropped it on the table, artfully bent. Unfortunately, this little demonstration was obviously not enough, because among the 20 or so strict observers, Voices were raised that Billy should demonstrate some more things, but he persistently refused until the constant urging obviously became too much for him. I could see very clearly that something changed in him, and his eyes became quite sad. Somehow it seemed to hurt him that his faithful demanded proof from him of his spiritual powers (powers of consciousness). Deeply saddened, he accepted a 10-centime coin handed to him by someone. "What shall I do with this?" he asked sorrowfully, and somehow visibly martyred by pain. Someone shouted that he should press the papillary lines of his fingers into the coin. "Good," was all he said in response, and a very sore tone sounded in his voice. He then convulsively pressed the coin between his thumb and forefinger, only to suddenly slam his fist down on the tabletop with such terrible violence that everyone present shot up in fright, probably thinking that Billy had gone mad. The coin slipped from Billy's fingers, somewhat bent, and clearly etched in the hard metal were his papillary lines. Unfortunately, however, even this demonstration was not enough, for calls for even more Meusters were heard. So Billy took a 2 franc and a 1 franc piece out of his wallet, placed them on the table in front of him, and asked what he should do with them. He did not receive a definite answer, whereupon, clearly visible to any observer, he picked up the 1 franc piece, let it slide into his palm, then clenched his hand into a fist and squeezed it with visible effort. When he opened his hand again, the coin was very badly bent. This also happened to the 2 franc piece, after which Billy was visibly exhausted. But the unreasonableness of some witnesses meant that what had been done was not enough, so more was demanded. Tired, Billy reached for his wallet again and wanted to take out another coin. But this did not happen, because from somewhere he was handed another 2 franc piece to work on. With a bitter face, he accepted the coin, let it slide onto his palm, and closed his hand into a fist. In front of everyone, then wearily said that this was the last thing he would do that night. Then he raised his arm high and stretched his fist toward Harold Proch, grinning painfully and lost in the world. Deep inside him, a hell seemed to be blazing, probably because he was being challenged and everything was being provoked to the last. His face was somehow distorted, and it seemed strange. Suddenly, however, his features seemed to distort even more. His skin became almost transparent, while tears suddenly rolled out of his eyes. Then it was simply outrageous. His physiognomy began to tremble along with the fist that hovered over the tabletop. Billy's eyes suddenly screamed open, his gaze lost somewhere in the infinite distance, while suddenly there was a heavy silence in the room and no one dared to make a sound. It lasted barely 10 or 15 seconds. Then Billy slumped down like a doll, snow white in the face and gasping for breath. Spasmodically, he opened his hand and let the now completely deformed and glowing 2 franc fall onto the table, only to cling just as spasmodically to Elsie's arm, helpless and obviously completely at the end of his tether. It took long minutes before Billy recovered and could speak reasonably. His lips had turned white-blue, and a burn mark was clearly visible in the palm of his hand. Why? We looked at the 2 franc piece that was now passing from hand to hand, and it was deformed, burnt through and burnt. One of the people who should know, explained that it had taken about 1,500 degrees of heat to burn the coin through. 1,500 degrees of heat, remember, and that developed in Billy's hand by the purest power of the spirit (consciousness). It should be obvious that none of us witnesses will ever again demand such madness from Billy. We have seen it all with our own eyes and witnessed it personally. It was enough for us, more than enough, in fact. Harold Prooch, who was sitting directly opposite Billy and was able to look him in the eye, was deeply shocked and said that he had suddenly seen through Billy's eyes into eternity. What more can one say? Billy, a human being like you and me, and yet he is so very different from all of us. Only now do I really understand how damn lonely this human being Billy must be, with all his gigantic knowledge and ability inside him, as Semyazi has often said of him. But how great in truth must this man be in himself that he does not use his gigantic powers to his material advantage, and does not even reach for them in thought, even in great need. If we, members of the free interest group, did not know very well who Billy is in truth, and who he was in former times of life, we might wonder about him. But this way we can recognize that the truth is everlasting and breaks through to the light again and again. Even though this truth is often very hard, we recognize it, no matter how much scheming is done against Billy by the ignorant, the misguided, and those who want to stand in the place he holds. But for all those, let it be said that in every respect they are far too small, too unimportant, and too weak to be able to offer Billy even a glass of water. For even if he is only a human being like you and me, he is nevertheless in all things much greater than all of us, something very special and particular in every respect. This must be made clear, whereby this clarification in no way has anything to do with glorification, adoration, or idealization, but solely with existing facts, with the most realistic truth unimaginable, that is still recognizable, and that will exist eternally. It is not laughable that at the present time Billy is disregarded and trampled underfoot, just because he is alive at the present time and is once again spreading the truth under a different name than he did in the past. And is it not even more laughable that, despite being trampled on with malice, he is simultaneously worshipped for his existence of a much earlier life, just because he bore a different name then, and because his teachings at that time were falsified in a cultic religious manner? Okay, now we're back to the contact report, looks like. Billy, that is not good, but can you at least send the squirts, parentheses, the energy-clearing dwarves, end parentheses, into our den and into her old room to remove her vibrations? It would also be necessary in Engelbert's apartment. Quetzal, that is what I wanted to talk about. Within the next 14 days, I will give you a day when everything will be cleaned by our little friends. Then nobody is allowed to be in the center. Billy, well, thank you. Also the little squirts. Now look here. There is another letter from Marcel. Can you give it to Semyazi? Quetzal, no, absolute silence is ordered for her. Therefore, I can deliver her no letters from you either. Billy, too bad, but it cannot be changed. How is she then? Quetzal, her condition is extremely satisfying, and complications are no longer to be expected when she has her necessary rest. Billy, all right, I understand. Then just love greetings to her from all of us. Quetzal, I will be happy to pay her these, and I should also bring you very dear greetings from her for you and all the group members. Billy, thank you very much, my son. That will please everyone. But now a question about Olgy and Marcel. Olgy cannot keep her time on the 25th of January and Marcel on the 4th of February. How much time, ... Quetzal, let me think for a moment, ... Yes, ... Olga would have to add one more day, while Marcel would have to add 2 more days, all of which has to be done before the 5th of February. As I had Semyazi explained to you earlier, the times change for everyone on the 6th of February, according to which a time of 2 hours applies uniformly. The timing can be handled individually by you from this date, but care should be taken to ensure that the Sohar Center is used as often as possible by each group member in relation to the meditative exercises. Well, okay. With regard to the previous fluidal power storage, the records have shown that the time can be reduced uniformly to 2 hours and 10 minutes for 3 group members by various factors, such as your wife, who nevertheless has to keep her additional day, Claire and Hans, while Elsa has to add another additional day to the already existing one. And I'm going to stick a note in here. These people in the core group, they have to go in and meditate in the center, and somehow their fluidal powers or their I don't know, their swinging waves are being saved in some kind of a device that Quetzal created. And I believe it has something to do with their reincarnation in the future. It's still kind of fuzzy, but they have certain amount of times they have to be in the center and they have to meditate. And if they miss one time, obviously they have to make that up because all of their swinging waves are being stored somehow for later use. Okay, we'll get back to it. This additional day must still be completed by the 5th of February. Billy, well, then one more question. Do you know anything about the fact that in the depths of the sea in the Bermuda Triangle, a huge pyramid is supposed to lie sunken? The baseline should be 333 meters and the height should be about 223 meters. Quetzal, something like this is not known to me. Billy, thank you. Then I have a whole series of questions to ask you. Do you still have time for that? Quetzal, are they questions from your initiative? Billy, no, they come from group members. I cannot answer Quetzal. I cannot answer such questions in the future anymore because they usually refer to things that we cannot answer. Otherwise, however, I recently also explained to you that for the time being, a joint decision should no longer be made. Despite the realization that we have made mistakes in your form of treatment and communication and assessment, the decision has been maintained that in the future, no explanations should be given unless the questions come from you personally, which should be controlled in each case with questions. Billy, that is hard, Quetzal. And then what about letters? Quetzal, in the future, no more should be addressed to us. Unfortunately, I do not make a decision on this alone, according to which I will not be able to change this matter on my own. Billy, then not, even if it is quite bitter. So let us talk about something else. I have a question to which I only want one answer in the report, but that I do not want my question to be mentioned. Quetzal, then ask your question. Billy, ... Quetzal, these concerns are known to me. They are based in incarnation transmissions because what was already created in the human being in previous lives and was of permanence, as you know, is held for all time in the storage banks and is impulsively reawakened. That is, withdrawn by the new personality from the storage banks again in the next life. For example, a once profoundly existing, fine fluidal-based love is not simply totally eliminated at death or by death, but is transferred to the spiritual realm, which returns it impulsively to the material realm at the next incarnation via the spiritual consciousness, subconsciousness, and the Gamut parentheses, fine fluidal spiritual counterpart to the half-material psyche, end parentheses, when the corresponding factors meet again, whereby it comes to bloom anew and expands more and more, up to the culmination point, where it unifies itself in universal form and unites itself with all that lives in gross material and creational energetic form. Billy, thank you, Quetzal. Your answer is very accurate and confirms everything I have found. So I was right about my result. Thank you. Quetzal, it was a pleasure to be able to give you the explanation. Billy, thank you, my son. But now tell me, were the squirts in the center to clean it about 4 times? Quetzal, you are oriented about that? Where from? They have actually been there 4 times. Billy, I just noticed 4 changes in the center. Quetzal, you do not miss a single detail in certain things, do you? Billy, you can wait a long time for that. But say, why do you not give me the reports after the context in the fast form like you did it twice? It would save me a lot of time. Quetzal, I can do this here and there, but not too often because it tears and pulls too much at your powers. If the reports are sent to you in the usual form as they have always been, then you are doing an unprecedented amount of work. But if I give it to you in the fast form I have developed, your work effort will increase massively. Billy, aha, how much time of normal work does it take if you send me a typewriter page report with the usual time? Quetzal, I have not calculated that, which is why I can only turn to you my self-calculated data, which is divided into minutes. 1 minute of telepathic transmission in the duration of the normal speaking time requires from you a power consumption of physical power of 23 minutes of normal work performance. Which means that if you have 30 minutes of telepathic recording to make, you perform a physical work performance of great magnitude, namely one that corresponds to 690 minutes of continuous and strenuous physical work. A 1-hour telepathic record to you thus requires 1,380 minutes of physical effort, while data triples in rapid transmission. So he's working his butt off. 23 minutes of, or 1 minute of telepathic transmission of a contact report works out to 23 minutes to write it down. If they give him an hour, 1 hour telepathic record to you thus requires 1,380 minutes of physical effort. So it looks to me like if they do a telepathic, that encompasses a whole lot more data than just talking to him. So anyway, Billy, so this means that for 1 hour of data transfer at normal work rate, 23 hours of physical work is involved. That is crazy. How am I supposed to do that? Quetzal, you constantly regenerate your strength, which is why you are always exhausted after a transmission, by the power consumption itself and by the regeneration process. Billy, but no one can keep that up. Quetzal, usually not, but somehow, and this is an unresolved riddle for us as well, you manage to keep it and keep it going. You manage it and keep it going. But now, my friend, it is time again because I have to go. Goodbye, and greet everyone very dearly from me, also your cannibal. A note here, cannibal is Billy's wife. That's her nickname. Billy. Yes, I still have to get her from the center at 2:15 hours. Take care, my friend, and also to your dear greetings. And that is the end of Contact Report 101. Okay? If you're still here and you're still listening, I appreciate it. And if not, well, then it's your loss. No, actually, you can, I'm sorry, you can read all of these contact reports, every last one of them, on the Future of Mankind website. So, and the one for this one, I'll put it in the description as well, but it's www.futureofmankind.co.uk/Billy_Meyer/contact_report_101. So, yeah, if you're still here, appreciate it, and good for you. We'll catch you on the next one. See ya.